Hello, my friends. I am coming to you trimmed down today. I'm just talking to you through my AirPods. I hope the sound is good. And if you're joining me, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. I'd love to also know, I always love to know, where are you from? I am coming to you from Toronto, Canada. And here in Toronto, sadly, very sadly, in the last little bit, we've had snow, which like just hits up all your stereotypes of what it's like to live in Canada. That we've had a bunch of snow again in the last little while. It isn't normally like this in May, but we're having like some sort of polar vortex scenario and we're struggling through. So tell me where you're from and also tell me what the temperature is there. It will just make me live vicariously through you and through, I hope, like the better time that you're having than me right now. So if we don't know each other, my name is Joanna Fleur, and I've worked in church communications for, well, I started in church communications when I was in the 10th grade, running communications for a youth group of about 400 people. So I've been doing, now I'm in my 30s, so I've been doing church communications for a few decades, which hard to believe that that much time has passed. So, how long have you been doing church communications? Why are you part of this group? I'd love to know. Interact with me in the comments, and we'll get started. Today, I thought I would bring to you some things in regards to some philosophies that I have and would bring to clients that I do consulting work with. If I'm coming into a church or a Christian organization doing strategy conversations or kind of when I make recommendations to an organization, there are some philosophies that I come from that inform the recommendations that I make. And so I thought that it would be fun today to tell you a few of what those are. And yeah, dive in. But the context of this is every week on the Reach and Teach Show. What I mean by that is reaching is evangelism and teaching is discipleship. That's what we're talking about. So every week on the show, we're trying to talk about approaches we can have to grow people who follow after Jesus in a meaningful way. And right now, it seems like all we're really talking about is digital things because that's all we can do in most places. Most places still haven't opened up. There are some churches that have started to come back. I've seen a bunch of you online interacting that yesterday was the first Sunday back to church in like a couple of months. Where I'm living, where a lot of other people are living, though, we're still completely digital. And I think a lot of us, even if we're not completely digital right now anymore, we're going to be 90% digital, for the long and foreseeable future. So I wanted to bring today some of the strategies that I have, and I've thrown them up in the corner here. I hope you can read them. They're a little bit tiny on the screen. I'll try to get out of their way. And right, so these are some of the communications philosophies I've come to in church over 15, 20 even years of doing this. And would love to hear some of yours. Maybe you have something similar to some of these, and maybe you disagree. Actually, that would be fun. I would love to hear if you disagree because then we can have an interesting conversation, and I'd love to hear your perspective either way. So my communication philosophy. I'm going to talk about the first one, digital first, but not digital only. So this is a philosophy I would bring to a church. Not in a quarantine scenario. This is just a general thing that I would recommend to any church. So what I talk about when I say digital first, but not digital only, what I mean is the primary place we want to have the most accurate, the best, the clearest information, the places that people sign up for things and pay for things and find out when the thing is happening and make contact with your church in any meaningful way. Digital first. We want to think of how we can create a solution to whatever we're trying to do digitally first. So if we're running an event, the first way we want people to sign up for our kids camp in the summer would be a digital way. We'd want to move away from, filling out paper forms. If we are doing a campaign, maybe we have a welcome back to church campaign. We would want primarily and firstly to think of what we could do in the digital spaces in order to facilitate that campaign. So that would be thinking about, I don't know, Facebook ads and videos and content that's shareable and email campaigns and all those kinds of things. We can talk about it more if you have any questions. Happy to give better examples of that. But when I say digital first, I don't mean digital only. Digital first, meaning the priority, the bias, the first foot forward, the best foot forward is digital because it allows us to have farther reach, to understand the metrics too of, like, for example, if we have a print card that we send like a flyer out to the neighborhood, or we put like an ad in the local newspaper, it's not that that's wrong, but if we think digital first, what would it look like to spend the exact same amount of money we did on the print campaign and did it in a digital campaign? So instead of flyers or a classified ad in the local newspaper, what would it look like to spend that same probably thousands of dollars and put that into Facebook ads that were targeted at the kind of people we want to meet? And the beauty of doing it that way is that compared to like the print card that you send out as a flyer in the neighborhood, it's really hard to measure who even looked at it. Did it get thrown in the garbage? Did it get blown away down the street? Did anyone even see it? Or did they care about it? But with digital content or digital ad, as a outreach tactic, it would allow you to actually know who clicked on it, how long did they stay, what did they do as a response to that? And so because of the focus on digital, you could basically spend the same amount of money as you would on print, but in a way that would give you more meaningful response and data. And so I'm saying all this about digital, but I'm also not saying no to print entirely. Digital first, but not digital only. So for that campaign, you're having a summer camp, you want people to sign up online. You want people to register their kids online. You want to have like a cool website page that like attracts families and makes it look like an amazing experience for their kids. Yes, because all the parents that you're trying to talk to and reach, they're living on this device just like the rest of us are. So that's where we want to reach them. But what would it look like if we equipped the people of our church with a thoughtful printed piece that would complement all the digital information without having to provide every single detail on the print piece? So it could be like a simple postcard, or even another recommendation I would have instead of a postcard, like a 4x6. If you do like a little business card size, they're super cheap. You can get like 1,000 of them for, I don't know, $20, and you give everybody a little stack of them. So you give everybody who's engaged in this campaign to reach people with the summer camp, you give them all like a little stack of 10 of these business card size invites, and it says like, join us at summer camp, the dates, and the link to the website. Like, that's it. It doesn't have to barely say anything, because with digital first, all the proper information, the registration, the signups, the frequently asked questions, all that stuff is going to live on your website, or it's going to live on a mini site even that you've built just for summer camp. But there is a place for print. I think sometimes print can actually validate something that we're doing digitally. It creates a bit of credibility to what we're doing. It can help it keep in front of mind, because it's easy for us to scroll through things digitally and pass it. But if it's a physical printed card that someone has given us, we have to physically engage with it, throw it out, connect with it, put it on the fridge, put it in our purse, or put it on our desk, I don't know, whatever it is. Like, there is an opportunity for high touch interaction with a printed piece. And so I would encourage you with printed pieces to keep it minimal. Like, don't put a ton of content information on the print piece, because you want to point them and give them a reason to go to your website to get more content, to get more updates and feedback. The other thing is too, this is a bit of the behind the scenes stuff, is that sometimes you don't actually know all the information at the deadline you need to go to print. For example, you may not, I don't know, maybe you don't know the price of tickets yet, or you're not sure of the date of the thing yet, or I don't know, whatever the issue is, or maybe the date is changing. That's that happens sometimes. But when it's printed on a card, it's like locked in, right? You can't fix it. You'd have to pay to reprint. But when you're having minimal information, that doesn't have to be so sensitive to changes that happen along the way, and you throw that onto the website, then if stuff changes, just change it on the website. It takes 5 seconds. Versus a print thing, which could cost a lot if you had to change it. So encourage that minimal content on print pieces, but thinking of strategic pieces. So another example I've seen this done in, this is coming up to a time for a lot of churches, the annual reports are happening around June. Like a lot of churches, their fiscal years July 1 to June 30. And so maybe a lot of you are thinking right now about annual reports. Something I would recommend for that when we say digital first but not digital only would be simply make an amazing template-based website like a Squarespace or the Church Co. or whatever template, Wix, whatever it is that you like to use. Build a website with all the content. And then it means you can get, even like with the financial numbers, you can get right at the very last minute with the most accurate, up-to-date financial numbers for your annual report. And then the piece that people receive in church on Sunday could be something in like the bulletin, or something like a little print card in the seats that is just a pointer to hopechurchannualreport.com or whatever. And so you can have that live there for the whole year. It allows you, if you do a digital annual report, to have like videos and photography and all this great stuff in it that you might not be able to do another way. But you can point people to it with a nice little print piece that's super simple, instead of spending tons of money on like a whole magazine and like something like that, that maybe even have like information in it that's like subject to change at the very last minute, and that's super stressful. It's very easy to change stuff digitally, but with print, once you print, it's locked in. And you spend a bunch of time and money designing it, printing it, etc. So digital first, but not digital only. I think maybe you're getting what I'm saying. I hope if you're getting what I'm saying, give me a thumbs up or a high five. Let me know if you have questions about that, or there's a particular project you're working on. I know that in my church community, moving leadership to digital first as a philosophy was something we had to prove over time. It took a while for leadership to change how they approach things, just simply because change is hard, right? And so I'd love to help you, coach you through, if you have a vision of something you think could be done so much better digitally, but you're still stuck in like the print side of things, or print only rather, instead of digital as the priority. I'd love to help you along. Let me know, reach out to me anytime if you're wanting to figure out how to get your leadership on board, or how to help them see what the possibilities would be with this kind of a philosophy for digital. The second one, Scope ABC, I feel like that should be an entire episode, so I'm going to pause on that one, and I think I'll wait till next week. Expect this one seems to be the Scope ABC is one of the ones that seems to unlock for a lot of people how to move forward in a strategic way. And it has to do with like that classic thing where people say stuff in church like, the thing that I love isn't being cared about by the leadership of our church because the pastor didn't talk about my event or my program or my ministry on a Sunday morning. It's like that classic problem of like, what is the stuff that gets talked about on a Sunday? What's the stuff that gets in the bulletin? What's the stuff that gets a print card or a video made or whatever? And I have a whole approach that I can teach you about how to do that. And so we're going to leave that for another day. So stay tuned. Let me know if you want that content so that when I come out with that next week, I'll make sure to tag you in it so you can find it. I want to move on to the We Tell the Truth philosophy, number 3. I think this one is really significant for churches and often missed, unfortunately, which is funny because, of course, we're Christians. And so when I say we tell the truth, what I mean is like we don't make things bigger or flashier or appear different than they actually are in reality. Some might call that lying, but I think in this sense it's often with the intention of trying to attract, trying to reach people, trying to disciple, reach and teach, trying to disciple people. But what happens when like, and I'll give some examples, but when things don't match, like, what you say and what's real, they don't match, they don't align as a communicator, it really breaks trust. So as I've said here on this, as you can see on the slide, this respects the audience and builds trust. And then the opposite, if you don't clearly communicate what is true, people are smart and they don't believe you, or they really quickly discover it. Here's a perfect example. You've maybe experienced this. Let me know. Give me a comment or a thumbs up if this is something that you have experienced in a church. The classic thing I'll see is like a church plant. This is just an example. A church plant, so like a smaller church that has an Instagram account, and everything they show in their photos is like, this is like this hoppin' big cool movement. Like, man, like everybody who's anybody is coming to this church event. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that new church plant in town seems to be doing really well. Good for them. And I say in town, like I live in a city of many millions of people, so there's lots of room for lots of church plants in my city. Maybe in your town it would feel a bit different, but yeah, we'd be excited about a church plant that was thriving and growing in our city. I know others struggle with that, with church plants, but I mean, hopefully you can feel like we're all in this together. So you go and you check out the church, and then you realize, like, the minute you walk in the door, that reality is nothing like what it looked like on Instagram. That, like, all the photos on Instagram made it look and feel like this was a room with, like, I don't know, 500 or 1,000, like 1,000 people were in the room by like the angles of the photos, and like how they talk about like every Sunday being like the best one ever and the killer message and all this kind of stuff. And then you go and there's like 200 people. Oh, okay. And the message is okay and the worship is fine, but like it's nothing spectacular in your view as like a professional church Christian person. And so it immediately starts to erode your trust, where like it didn't matter that there were 200 people there instead of 1,000. Like, it's fine. But the fact that they tried to make it look like there were 1,000 when there were only 200 is the kind of thing that breaks trust. And it makes it really hard for people as soon as they walk in the door to see, like, oh, this isn't what I thought. Oh, like, if that's not true, if that perception isn't real, like, what else might be untrue? So we tell the truth because it respects our audience. And it builds a ton of trust. Like, it's okay to post a photo on social media of a gathering of people. I mean, now it'll be like that for everybody, of course, with quarantine stuff. But, you know, philosophically, the gathering of people and there's empty seats in the auditorium or the sanctuary, like, that's okay because that's the truth of what it was. Or, you know, the classic thing is about how do you talk about numbers. Number of views now is the big question on Carrie Newhoff did a whole thing on Church Pulse Weekly, if you follow that podcast, with David Kinnaman and Carrie. They did a whole kind of episode about how do we measure stats and data of who's watching our services on Sundays. And they made some jokes about it, but I think the reality is that there's a lot of people who overinflate their numbers. And if you keep doing that, well, if you start doing that, you kind of have to keep doing it, because otherwise, if you start telling the truth later, it looks like you've had like a big decline in your attendance. And more than that, it's stuff like if you're doing that with salvations, or like, you know, you're trying to reach people and teach people and you say we had 20 salvations, and like, actually, how did you even measure that? Maybe it was really only like 2, but you used some sort of funky metrics of measurement that were a bit vague. Somebody clicked that they gave their life to Christ by accident when they moved their hand across their laptop or whatever, and like they've been at the church for 20 years and they love Jesus, so like they shouldn't be counted. I'm trying to just continue to say that the problem with that kind of stuff is that it disrespects people's intelligence. People are smart. We've grown up in like a marketing savvy. We've been advertised to our whole life. And we have enough awareness of how the internet works to know that some of these numbers, they just aren't real. And so I encourage you to tell the truth because it respects your audience and it builds trust. And how are you going to win people for Christ? How do we reach and teach people if they don't trust us? We cannot. It's fundamental that we live in a trustworthy way. And we tell the truth. It doesn't matter if there were 200 or 1,000 people in the room. God was moving. God was doing something amazing. He's using you to serve, and so be encouraged that the truth is enough, and we're not trying to impress people with things that as soon as they showed up would realize was a bunch of crap anyways. Okay, the last one I want to talk about today is the outsider bias. We consider the needs of others. We consider the needs of outsiders before the needs of insiders. And what I mean by that in communications is we want to be constantly wondering, are we communicating in such a way that would make someone feel like they are welcome, that we expected them, that we are not just trying to like be afraid to keep those that we have, but actually are being courageous to go out and reach people. You know, I just launched a Facebook group this week. If you want to find it, it's called Digital Church. Come find it, or I can link it below. Let me know if you want to find it. DM me or whatever. Happy to let you connect into that group if you want to join. And Digital Church is a group that's really about trying to figure out how to do this digital church thing. But one of the questions and comments that was happening in this Facebook group today was about how many people, how many churches are not even naming or welcoming that there might be new people in their church services right now. So like, I mean, this happens in like physical churches too, but on online church, do we have a bias towards acknowledging, welcoming, greeting, connecting, explaining to outsiders who might be listening? So even if you're part of a community that you know, like there's no outsiders, and it starts to feel funny, it feels funny at first, but it starts to become normal and part of your culture. If like you welcome new people, and point them at, you know, a connect card or a welcome gift or whatever, even if you kind of know that there's no new people there right now. It's not about number 3 where we talked about like we tell the truth and we're lying about it, but there's a way you could say it to acknowledge and encourage welcome for new people. And then what it does is put in people's minds when they're there, like, I know that my church is welcoming to new people. I know that when I invite someone to come here, or I'm gonna invite someone to come here because I know they're not gonna be embarrassed. I know that they might be acknowledged, but not in a way that's like weird or like making them feel, you know, put on the spot in any way. But we're gonna have a bias towards welcoming them, even if they may not even be with us yet, so that we build a culture that helps people understand that this is a safe place to reach and to teach people. There's all kinds of ways that can look, but you know, it's stuff to do with paying attention to the kind of cultural context that we live in, the local city or town that we're trying to reach and teach, and thinking about what do the people of that place need, not the people who are already in who are already in the church only. Of course we need to care for them. Of course we do. I'm talking about communications, not about, you know, pastoral care and things like that. We should care for those who we shepherd, of course. What I'm talking about in communications is to think about, how does this sound to an outsider? If a non-Christian was reading this, or a person who's never been to church, would they even know what that word meant? Like when we say the sanctuary, if you're not from a church, you might think of a bird sanctuary or like a animal sanctuary, like a place that, you know, like a farm, as opposed to like a place within a church building that people go to gather and worship and teaching. So we want to be really thoughtful at the bias towards outsiders with the language we use in our communication. We want to have a bias towards outsiders with a welcome and acknowledgement. Here's a little quick thing. One of the things I love to do as a phrase is say not just, hey, if you're new. I say, if you're new, when I host a church service, I like to, and I'm like the person doing maybe the announcements and prayer time or whatever. What I like to say is, if you are new, or if you still feel new, something along those lines. If you're new amongst us, or if you still feel like you're new amongst us. We're so glad you're here. We'd love to connect with you. Would you fill out the connect card? We have a gift for you, you know, blah, blah, blah. Because a lot of people, when you say, if it's your first time here, well, they're like, well, it isn't my first time here. So you're immediately excluding them. They're still an outsider, but you've kind of excluded them because you said you have to be first time visitor. I would encourage you to use language of more like new if you're new around here, or then the language of feeling new. Because you know what? Some people might feel new and they've been like kind of on the peripheries checking out your church. They could have been there for a year. It could be longer than a year, and they've never reached out. They've never given you their email address to get the church newsletter. They've never gotten involved. They've never put their kid in a program. They've always been kind of like first, like last one in, first one out at the end of a church service because that's what they wanted. And you know what? For a time, that may be all that they're able to do. But they might still then feel very much like an outsider. And so when you say if you're new or feel new, it allows that outsider to connect in, even if they've been there for a while, but you're acknowledging that they still might feel very new. And so, yeah, I just see somebody coming up here. If I can add it here, Shannon saying, love that if you're new or feel new. Yeah. So I encourage you to use, it may not be the right words for you, but encourage you to acknowledge that, of course, there are people who aren't new, but they certainly feel like an outsider. So there's probably a way you can say it to acknowledge that it's definitely not their first time, or they come like twice a year for 20 years. So they're still the outsider, you know, but we want to acknowledge them whether it's their first time, their 20th time, and they still feel like an outsider. So that's the kind of thing I'm saying with that outsider bias. We want to acknowledge those who might feel on the outside, and they may or may not actually be newcomers or first-time visitors or new guests to our church. But they're on the outside for some reason, maybe by their own choice, and they're now deciding they want to connect, or maybe because they've always misunderstood what you're talking about because you're using language that's such insider language about a location in your church, or you call the youth group elevate youth or whatever, but like nobody really knows what that is. What grade is that for? Could I go? All that kind of stuff. When we're using language, let's just make sure we're explaining it always with a bias towards thinking of the outsiders among us. And even if there aren't outsiders among you, like for a fact, there's like 200 people in your church, they've all been there for years. If we don't start using language that acknowledges an outsider or gives a framework for someone to explain what we're doing, it makes people who've been there for a long time but still don't know what's going on feel even more like outsiders because they're too embarrassed to tell you that they don't know what's going on. And the second thing is, it doesn't make it a safe place for people to invite others. If we want to reach people, we have to talk like we actually want to reach them. And so even if they don't yet exist, it's not a lie like the we tell the truth thing, which was that another one of the philosophies we spoke about. We're not lying about like, oh, I see all those hands, I see all those new people. No, don't lie. If they're not there, they're not there. But there's a way we can include outsiders in our language. We're so thanks to everyone who's inviting their friends. And if you're new around, or like, I don't know, you have a communion or a Eucharist time, whatever the Lord's Supper, whatever you call it in your church. Don't assume that everyone knows what this is and why it's happening or who is allowed to take it. I would encourage you to explain it, because then people know that if they brought a friend, that friend wouldn't feel like an idiot for not knowing. They know that they can trust that you're going to explain it. Okay, I feel like I've said a ton of things. I see Dorian is asking, hey, will this be posted? Yes, we always post the videos on here. We save, and also apparently now we're going on YouTube with them, so that's awesome. I'd love to connect with you here, connect with you on YouTube. You can connect with me in the Digital Church Facebook group if you want to come and connect on all things Digital Church. Love to see you there, and we'll see you next week here on Church Communications page as we talk about how to reach and teach people with the best news in the world. Bye.